The Israeli army has flattened buildings in the densely populated Gaza Strip with airstrikes overnight after a massive surprise attack by Palestinian militant Islamist group Hamas left hundreds dead. Israel's military says the strikes were on Hamas targets. That, as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned Israel, was, quote, embarking on a long and difficult war, with the government set to cut off electricity, fuel and goods to the Gaza Strip. Hamas militants have taken dozens of Israeli hostages. The fighting is threatening to escalate further, with Lebanon's Hezbollah shelling Israeli positions in disputed territory along the country's border, with Israel firing back into southern Lebanon. DW correspondent Rebecca Ritters is in Jerusalem, and she told us about the situation in the south of Israel, where fighting is still ongoing.
Well, Monica, Israelis are waking up to more bad news this morning. The situation in the south still tense, still incredibly hard to digest for everyone here. I was on a call briefing with the IDF this morning, the Israeli military, that is. They said that the situation has come a lot more under control overnight. They've been bombing positions along the border where Hamas militants were using to breach the border wall and come into Israel. They've been attacking those positions to try and stabilise the ability of people to come in and out, and they've also been able to retake some of the communities around the Gaza wall that were overrun by Hamas militants yesterday. Now, it has taken a surprisingly long time for many of those communities to be cleared, and they still said that there are 8 active points of engagement. They're not as severe as they had been yesterday, and a lot of those places are still mainly being cleared and checked to see whether there are militants still in those areas. Now, the entire area, all those villages and communities around the wall are being evacuated, and you know, obviously the death toll is rising. The official figures that we have are between 200 and 250 and 300 at this point. You're seeing differing figures in local media here, but the figure looking to be more closer to the 300. Now, the Israeli military not wanting to give any official figures. They said that they will be bringing out numbers later today, but that there will be many casualties to report. They have also said that there are soldiers, civilians, children, elderly and even bodies that have been taken hostage in Gaza. And once again, no actual figures on no official numbers there, but we're talking about a lot of people.
Right. And Rebecca, Israel, as we hear, has now also come under fire from Lebanon. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, in the last, even just before coming on air, we're seeing Hezbollah now retaliating and hitting targets in the north of Israel, in a disputed area. Israel have also fired back. There's been back and forth cross-border firing. Now, on the call that I was speaking to the Israeli military this morning, the representative there saying that they're really warning Hezbollah not to get involved. They believe at this stage Hezbollah may not get involved, but as we've seen, they haven't been completely accurate in their assessment so far. So that they are urging them not to get involved, but they are reassuring that they are prepared for anything. They're bolstering their troops up in the north, and they are, of course, monitoring that situation very closely. They have been targeting some areas that have been under dispute for some time, tensions building on that border for a long time, and they've been targeting those positions as well. But at this stage, the main focus is still in the south and clearing those towns around the Gaza border fence.
All right, DW correspondent Rebecca Ritters in Jerusalem. Rebecca, thank you so much. The surprise attack by Hamas caught Israel's military off guard. A massive barrage of missiles helped cover the movements of militants who streamed into Israel. Authorities there say 300 people have been killed and a number of hostages were taken in the attack. Israeli forces have responded with airstrikes on Gaza, where Palestinian officials say more than 230 people were killed. Here's a look at how events unfolded on Saturday.
After After a brief halt in the rocket barrages, Palestinian militants renewed their fighting, firing several volleys into central Israel on Saturday night, sending people rushing to bomb shelters for cover. Immediately after the start of the surprise attacks from Gaza, Israel called up hundreds of thousands of military reservists.
Citizens of Israel, we are at war, not in an operation, but at war. The enemy will pay an unprecedented price. In the meantime, I call on the citizens of Israel to strictly adhere to the directives of the IDF and Homefront Command. We are at war, and we will win.
The attacks began at dawn. Palestinian militants in Gaza fired thousands of rockets at targets in southern Israel. Not all of them could be intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome defense system. At the same time, hundreds of Hamas fighters broke through the border fence into Israel. The coordinated early morning assault included paragliders, according to unverified video footage released by Hamas. The attackers also used combat drones. The goal, according to Hamas, make Israel bleed.
We have decided to put an end to Israel's misdeeds with God's help, so that the enemy will realize that the time when he can do mischief without being held accountable is over.
In Israeli communities along the border with Gaza, attackers fired at civilians on the street. The occupants of this minibus never stood a chance. After infiltrating Israeli towns and army bases, Hamas also kidnapped soldiers and civilians, taking them back into Gaza and holding them hostage. In response to the unprecedented assault, the broadest invasion of its territory in 50 years, Israel has launched Operation Swords of Iron, striking several targets inside Gaza, including multi-story buildings. Israel's Netanyahu is vowing to turn Hamas strongholds into rubble.
Amid the continuing violence, US President Joe Biden has reiterated his country's unwavering support for Israel. He said that support was rock solid and talks were underway with the Israeli government to provide military aid.
When I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu this morning, I told him the United States stands with the people of Israel in the face of these terrorist assaults. Israel has the right to defend itself and its people, full stop. There's never justification for terrorist attacks. It's also a terrible tragedy on a human level. It's hurting innocent people, seeing the lives that have been broken by this, the families torn apart. It's heartbreaking.
We're now joined by Lieutenant Masha Michelson, Deputy Head of the Israeli military's Foreign Press Unit. Thank you so much for taking the time for us. Prime Minister Netanyahu has vowed unprecedented retaliation to the attack. How will the Israeli military go about clearing the area of Hamas militants while also ensuring minimum civilian casualties?
Thank you for having me. As you said, we have had a very difficult 24 hours with unprecedented Hamas infiltration and massacres in civilian population points. They have been killing and kidnapping women, children, and elderly people. What the IDF has done in response is we have deployed hundreds of thousands of reservists, and we are sending them to the south of Israel. We have units that are trained in dealing with these situations, going door to door, house to house, and making sure that there is no terrorists left on Israeli soil and fighting against the people that have raised their arms against us. And while we are sending those units to the south, we are calling for people to stay locked in their houses, and not open the door to anyone, to let the IDF forces conduct their mission safely and efficiently. In addition, we are striking in the Gaza Strip. We have struck 426 targets since yesterday, including 100 strikes from UAVs that have been conducted on the border with Gaza for anyone who's trying to cross additionally into Israel and infiltrate our lines. The IDF is prepared for any other threats that come our way, and we're trying to get the southern region of Israel back to stable and back to normal.
Casualties, obviously, heavy casualties, and but also on both sides. And when you say you strike back, what kind of warning do you give to the civilian population in the Gaza Strip?
So we are asking the civilians of the Gaza Strip to stay out of harm's way, and we are striking military targets that are used by Hamas to incite terror, to execute terror attacks, military bases, intelligence offices, and people who aren't terrorists should stay back and not go into those buildings. The IDF has various systems in place to strike those targets as safely as possible, and we're trying to minimize the collateral damage, but unfortunately we are at war, and there have been multiple casualties on the Israeli side. This is a very unfortunate situation.
Right. Lieutenant Michelson, it's been repeated again and again since yesterday that this attack came as a surprise. How could Israeli intelligence have missed such a complex offensive by Hamas that must have taken months of planning?
It is an important question. It is a question that needs to be asked. But right now, the IDF is fighting, and there are people's lives at risk. There is Israeli territory that is infiltrated by terrorists. And once the fighting is done, once Israel is safe again, we will be able to conduct the needed investigations calmly, without bias, and thoroughly.
Calmly and without bias, but what can we expect from such an investigation?
It is left for the future. Right now, we're focusing on the war, fighting our enemies, and the investigation that will be ordered by the senior officials, both in the state and in the IDF. I'm sure it will bear revealing results.
All right. Well, Lieutenant Masha Michelson from the IDF Foreign Press, thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you.